Hey everyone, it's Mr. Aiken here. With our first lesson that we're going to be taking a look at with this whole new distance learning thing, it's a bit of a learning curve here as we're trying to get used to the whole situation that we have going on. But I hope you're staying healthy and I hope you're staying safe. And this first lesson here is going to be a bit shorter, considering it's going out on a Thursday. It'll be going out on Thursday, the 23rd of April. And I'll keep it nice and easy here. So we've got kind of two things. We've got the document that you're looking at right here that is also on my screen. The video, which you're currently listening to. We're going to be talking about the four main causes of World War I. That was our next topic that we were getting to, which is World War I. So consider this kind of like your note sheet. So as I'm talking, I'm going to flip back to my PowerPoint here in a second. You can use this sheet to take your notes here. You've got the letters on the sides. You've got the place to type your summaries, and this will kind of be our notes. And then we'll move on to the response section afterwards. So flipping to our PowerPoint here, we're talking about World War I, which is a very interesting and deep topic. It's unfortunate that we're not going to be in the classroom here to learn about this one, but we'll make the most of it here. So essentially, World War I is going to be the entirety of Europe and eventually pretty much most of the world fighting with each other, right? It's the World War I. And what's going to cause this is going to be four main things, and we're going to call them the main causes of World War I. Reason being is it's an acronym. So acronym means that each letter in main stands for a word or represents a word that'll hopefully make it a little bit easier for us to remember them and to recall some of those things. So we've got M, A, I, and N. So looking at those letters, hopefully a couple of those letters, you might be thinking about past topics that we've covered and thinking about what those letters might represent here. The first one you probably won't be able to guess. First letter is the letter M, and that stands for militarism. So militarism, the word probably looks familiar, right? It's essentially means military. We're talking weapons. We're talking especially new weapons, in such as the picture over here. We've got this guy sitting at a machine gun. It's a whole new type of war that World War I is going to be. Now, with the increase in industrialization that we're seeing across pretty much all of Europe at this point, it's not just Great Britain and it's not just other countries trying to catch up. Pretty much everyone is industrialized at this point. They're all taking advantage of these new technologies. They've got factories. They've got much more urban populations. That means people moving to the cities to work in those factories. And they're going to be churning out these new weapons in pretty high numbers. And now these militaries haven't used them yet. They just don't know how effective they are. And a problem that's going to come up is that these countries are going to be willing to use these new weapons without really knowing how deadly they could actually be in order to protect themselves and their colonies. And it becomes what's called an arms race. So that means when one country builds up their power, another country will see that and say, wait a minute, we can't fall behind here. We also need to build up our military. And then the other country in response will do the same thing. And it just starts to build and build and build. So that will be our first cause here of World War I, is this increase in military presence in Europe. Now, here is a map of general military forces in 1914. So we can look at our key down here in the bottom. We can see which countries were on what sides. We had the green countries were allied with each other. We have the United Kingdom, France, Russia, Serbia being the main players here. And then you have Germany and Austria-Hungary kind of wedged in the middle here. And now, based on the map, go ahead and take a minute. You can think about this on your own. The key says that each tank represents 100,000 soldiers. So whose side would you want to be on when this war breaks out? Who has the advantage when it comes to military presence? Let's go ahead and take a minute to think about that. So looking at the map here, we can definitely point out one of the most obvious things is that it appears that Germany has the largest military, and they do by quite a bit, right? It looks like France has 12 tanks, uh, Russia has about 14 tanks, roughly, right? Um, but Germany has 3 times 6. That's 18 tanks, 19, including this one down here. They have an absolutely massive military force. They're teaming up with Austria-Hungary, who is quite smaller, but we'll see once these military forces become combined, who's going to have an actual advantage in the war to come. So the next letter, the letter A, is going to stand for alliances. Now, if you were at school with us on the last day there on March 13th, way back when, I'd given out an assignment that I can't collect now, right? We're kind of separated now. But it was a map labeling Europe in 1914, and I had you guys color that map based on the alliances that those countries were in. So an alliance is when a group of countries come together and they decide we're going to protect each other no matter what. We're going to have each other's back. If one of us gets attacked, we'll consider it all of us being attacked. And the main alliance here that forms first is going to be called the Triple Alliance, named because there are 3 countries in it, right? We've got Germany, we've got Austria-Hungary, and we've got Italy. So those 3 countries have come together and agreed that if one were to go to war, then all of them would be going to war with each other. Now, these countries, we've talked about them a little bit together, especially Germany and Italy, right? Way back when we talked about them being unified by this common sense of nationalism, right? The German people had come together as one country. The Italian people had come together as one country. And they realized that as kind of the new kids on the block, right? They're the newest countries in Europe, that they might be seen as a target or might be seen as maybe easy pickings for these well-established countries like Britain, France, and Russia that have been around for hundreds and thousands of years. And so this power in numbers meant that they could protect each other and make sure that the rest of the countries of Europe maybe didn't want to fight them, didn't want to go to war with their entire alliance. Not to be outdone, though, the Triple Alliance was going to have its arch enemy in those other 3 countries, which are the Triple Entente. So Great Britain, France, and Russia, although it's a less formal alliance and made in response to the Triple Alliance, it was still something that said, hey, if one of us has to go to war, we can all go to war together. As the kind of established countries of Europe. They were the old empires. They were the ones that had been around for a while and wanted to kind of keep that status quo of them being in power and the rest of the world maybe not. Now, the goal of the alliance was actually peace, right? They were not making these alliances with the intention of immediately going to war. It was essentially meant to be a deterrent, right? If you are looking to fight, say, Germany, maybe you back off a little bit because you realize that they have 2 countries right behind them. You don't want to be the country that gets attacked by an entire alliance at once. That's not a good position for you to be in. So the alliance is meant to kind of dissuade or prevent war, but we'll see that it's definitely not going to end like that. Now, the letter I am guessing you were able to put together that I is going to stand for imperialism, that last topic that we covered before we went on this long break. Remember, we had discussed the scramble for Africa. I've got the maps here that we had looked at together as a class backup on this PowerPoint here. And just kind of thinking back, remember, who did we say won the scramble for Africa? You can look at the map here. We discussed that they had that Berlin conference where they all came together and decided which countries of Europe were going to take different parts of Africa with no regard for the countries that already existed, right? No regard for the empires that were already there, the peoples and tribes that already existed. And our big winners were France, who took most of the Sahara and Madagascar, and Great Britain, who took the areas in Egypt and the Nile River, and then parts of southern Africa as well. They're going to be kind of the top dogs in Africa. So these ideas are going to end up creating competition between these nations, right? You've got the big winners, France and Britain, are in an alliance together. And countries like Germany say, hey, wait a minute, why didn't we get as much as they did? We are this new powerful country. We have, if we looked back at the military map, right, we have the strongest military, actually. Why didn't we get bigger chunks of Africa? And so it's going to create this us versus them mentality, right? The idea being, if you go to war with somebody and you beat them, well, guess what? Those colonies now become yours. And so Germany and Italy are definitely kind of on that mindset of this could be an opportunity to increase their imperial presence and get more of those raw materials from those colonies and become much stronger. And last, the letter N is nationalism. This newfound sense of pride in Europe. Now, nationalism we had discussed as being both positive and negative force, right? We had made the argument together that nationalism can be a good thing because it helps to bring people together. It helps to create countries like Italy and Germany, where those people had been fighting with each other, not agreeing, but once they came together as a country, some of that stops. But nationalism can also be a bad thing because of especially things like in imperialism. We discussed this us versus them, and that's exactly what happens with nationalism as well. Nationalism can be this idea that your country is superior to the rest of the world. And so we're going to start to see tensions rise, especially in an area called the Balkan region of Europe. Now, that's going to be the areas essentially south of Austria-Hungary, in and around the Balkan region. So a new dual monarchy called Austria-Hungary had been created, and there was continued problems amongst these smaller ethnic countries like Serbia as a continued source of issues. So we're going to see here on the map here, I'm going to show this first map. This is Europe in 1907. We've got Austria-Hungary up here in the north. We've got this Balkan region down here. This is what the area looked like in 1907. Now let's flip forward. This is it in 1914. So let's flip back and forth here a couple times, and you can see the changes that start to happen. You've got Serbia expanding south, right, in 1907. They're fairly small, but they've almost doubled in size here by 1914. We've got Bulgaria becoming its own country, breaking away from the Ottoman Empire over here to their southeast. You've got Greece expanding north. You've got the creation of Albania. But possibly the most important change when it comes to starting this war is going to be right here. We've got this area called Bosnia being taken over by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now, how is that going to cause the rest of the world to go to war? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing next week as France, Germany, Russia, Britain, and everyone else in Europe gets involved in what might seem like a small spark. So to recap here, we've got our main causes of World War I. First and foremost, we have militarism, the massive military buildup, this competition between nations to be the strongest. You want to have the most bullets. You want to have the most people in your military. You want to be the most prepared for a war. Second are the alliances for protection. So we've got those two main alliances. We've got the Triple Alliance. We've got the Triple Entente, meant to protect each other, but we'll possibly see why that doesn't work out. Letter I stands for imperialism, rivalries from empire building, thinking back to that Berlin conference, the big winners, the big losers, and wanting to expand your country's power. And then last is nationalism or loyalty to your country, ethnic groups wanting independence. New countries like Italy and Germany want to compete for power. So, getting back to the lesson here. So, we've got our main causes here: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. So, now if you scroll down here, you'll see step 2, and this is kind of our check here, our response here. Which of these 4 causes do you think will be the most important cause of a massive world war? So looking back here, we've got 4 things, all of which we've discussed throughout this semester, so things that should sound familiar. Which one do you think is the most important when it comes to starting a world war, or what's going to be the main cause? And I want you to explain why here. So it asks for about 3 to 5 sentences. Definitely use your prior knowledge here, right? We talked a lot about imperialism and nationalism and industrialization and things like that. So think about those things that we've talked about and to explain why those might cause a war. After you finish with that question, you can move on here to step 3. Preparing for next week's lesson. I've got a short video here, the spark that began World War I. It's going to explain that maybe it was an accident that led to all of the dominoes kind of falling in place. All right. Well, thank you for checking in with us. If you have any questions, please check for office hours. Send me an email. I'm willing to help with anything. Like I said, this first lesson's a little bit shorter. Wanted to kind of make it manageable this first week as we're all trying to figure out how we're getting through this. So stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.